with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at a new-ish Spyderco for 2019. This is the Spyderco Endela, kind of a cool little knife. The main thing that this knife does is offers a different size option. So this is going to be kind of a weird review, and it's kind of a weird knife because if you already have and like an Endura or Delica or perhaps both, then I see very little motivation to need to go out and pick this up. Now, if on the other hand, maybe you own those knives, but you think, the Delica is a little too small and the Endura is a little too big, then perhaps this is just right. And so, this may be for some people a Goldilocks knife. And maybe, Spyderco has been missing out on a significant portion of the marketplace because they feel like, the Delica is too small and the Endura is too big. I don't know if that's the case, but if it is, and if that's you, then the Endela may be the perfect knife for you. I kind of wish they would have picked something different for the name. I mean, it's sort of, there's just no creativity there. It reminds me of like remember Benifer or, one of those celebrity couples where they just slam the names together and, it becomes a thing. And so that's kind of what we've done here. So let me begin with size and weight. And perhaps for some of you, this will be the end of the conversation because this is the main thing that it does different. And so if this is, significant to you, then that's going to make a big difference. Okay, so listen, this knife is just over 8 inches long, 8 and 1/16. The blade length here is a hair under 3.5 inches, so 3 and 7/16. The handle length is 4 and 11/16, so just a hair under 3/4 there, so just about 4 and 3/4 inches. And the grip area, now the grip area is something that's notable because there's quite a bit of room here, even for some substantially large hands. All right. It feels quite nice in hand, and you can see that I've still got quite a bit of handle exposed. So even if my hands were much larger, like a full, half an inch, I would still be pretty comfortable carrying, using this knife and getting some work done because of the real estate that's available there. And so perhaps, okay, if you're someone who likes, you want a knife that has a good, large, comfortable handle, but you don't want a huge blade, this could be really, really perfect for you. All right. How does this compare to the Endura and Delica? Well, let me give you that also. Oh, by the way, 3.1 ounces. So this is very lightweight, which is pretty impressive. Now, let me give you a quick comparison. So what we have here is 8 inches. The Endura, okay, is going to be 8 3/4. So add 3/4 of an inch to this. If you can see my finger there, this is about where the Endura would land. If, on the other hand, the Delica is more your thing, you can sort of take an inch away from this at just over 7 inches, like 7 and 1/8, and that's going to be sort of where the Delica lands in terms of blade length. Right, this is just under 3.5. The Endura is going to give you 3 3/4, and the Delica is going to give you just a hair under 3 inches. So that's how those kind of stack up in terms of size and weight. And so if that sounds good to you, this may be the perfect thing, right? This may be a knife that you immediately want to go out and buy. For others, if you've already got an Endura and like it, or a Delica and like it, then there's probably not much reason to buy this. The other points of this review, you could almost carbon copy my Endura review and just rehash all of those points. Okay, so we've got a full flat ground VG10 blade here, very thin behind the edge, fairly thin stock in general. So this is going to be a nice knife that slices quite well. All right, in terms of your regular cutting tasks, VG10 is going to hold an edge moderately well. It's going to be quite stain resistant. And the overall performance on this as a cutting tool is going to be very, very good, so long as, this is the kind of blade length that you're looking for. Of course, if you want it longer or shorter, the other options are out there. The other thing to say about this blade is that it's going to be, it looks almost like someone put a kitchen knife in a folding knife. I mean, a kitchen blade in Wow. Kitchen knife blade in a folding knife. And for those people who do a lot of food prep and that kind of stuff, that's going to be fantastic. The other thing that I've got to say at this point, VG10 steel is sort of, I don't know, it's not something that people are super excited about or really looking for most of the time. It's not a bad steel. Not at all. And for the price point, which is about 80 bucks, it's completely appropriate. All right. So, what do I think of the blade? Yeah, it's a completely passable blade. I have no issues with this blade whatsoever. Moving on to lockup and deployment. This is, of course, a mid back lock with the Boyd dent. It's got, in terms of an opening mechanism, the spider hole. Like the Endura and Delica, this is not a knife, like I can do it, but it's not a knife that flicks really well, but it does flick. Okay, the Endura goes a little nicer because you've got that little extra length of blade and a little more weight there, so you can sort of get it to flick out a little more readily. But it's a backlock, guys, and backlocks tend to not flick well because the lock bar, and we've had this conversation before, but that lock bar is under spring tension, and so it's constantly squeezing the back of the blade there. Okay, in terms of functionality, not a problem at all. And I will say, this is a knife that's really, once you get even a little bit used to it, the spider hole is a great opening mechanism, and you're going to be able to do it with gloves or in any situation. It's going to deploy readily for you, and the lock is going to be quite adequate. By the way, I have seen some Enduras with a little bit of blade play, or Delicas with a little bit of blade play. It's not common, but this one is pretty solid. The stretch, Spyderco stretch, I had blade play in that knife, drove me a little bit crazy. It wasn't bad, and you're not going to find a real problem with it, but every once in a while you might find a little. This particular example is quite good. All right, so action, it's not fast, it's not really fidgety, but it definitely works well and is comfortable and reliable. The handle, again, this is something you're going to be very familiar with. Okay, we've got the Spyderco FRN bidirectional texturing. We've got internally some stainless steel liners here, and of course a backlock, Torx bit construction, all things that we've seen quite a number of times, as well as a four-way repositionable clip, right? You can see that there. Again, something we're very familiar with from the other models. I will say, this handle is very comfortable, and the bidirectional texturing works really, really well. The thumb ramp, which again we're used to seeing on Spydercos, and it kind of leads over the spider hole there, is very good. And in terms of having to do a lot of work with this, it's going to be quite nice to have that extra stability from that thumb ramp. I think Spyderco users, if you're a regular carrier and user of a lot of different Spydercos, you'll be very, you'll miss that ramp that they often provide. What about comparisons? Well, we've already talked extensively about the Endura and the Delica, which are essentially the same knife, just in a different size. Worth pointing out here, let's see, is the Para 2. So Paramilitary 2 is very, very similar in size, right? This is 8 inches, this is 8 1/4 inches. Actually, this is 8 1/8, so they're only an eighth of an inch different. Blade length, you can see, is very, very similar, almost the same amount of cutting edge on these. Size is very similar. You got a little more handle real estate with the Para, and of course that those Spidernomics, so gives you the ability to choke up, which is enjoyable. And you do get that fidget factor provided by the compression lock, which is going to be worthwhile to a lot of people. Now, price point, I think this is around 80 bucks, and here you're going to be going up to like 130 or 140 if you get sort of the standard Para 2. Another big comparison, or worthwhile comparison, is going to be the Harrier 2 from Bird. This is essentially the Bird version of this knife. I will do a full comparison on that. I don't know if this video will post first or the comparison will post first, but you just know that there's probably one out there if you're watching this. If you're watching this the day it comes out, I may or may not have the comparison out already, but within a pretty short time it should be there. So this is an interesting comparison. They're very, very similar. The Bird is smaller, so notice, right? It's a little bit less. Hold on. A little bit less cutting edge, but barely, maybe a 16th less. Substantially smaller handle though. So this is going to give you almost the same blade, but carry, be in a smaller package overall, and going to be a little nicer to carry perhaps. We've got G10 instead of FRN. And of course, some people are really going to like that finger choil. And I already had comments on my first impressions of this knife about the fact that the Harrier 2 had better ergonomics. I don't know if I totally agree with that. I find this handle a little more hand-filling, and I, as I've been saying, appreciate that extra bit of real estate. I also tend to be a finger choil guy, so I am certainly drawn to that. Now, I'm not going to belabor this too much. Oh, the steel is going to be significantly, or fairly degraded, if you will, a downgrade. Wow, it's hard to speak today. On that steel from VG10 to 8CR13 MOV. What else have we got? Oh, here's a similar sized knife, which is new from Steel Will, D2, so not going to be as stainless. This is a G10 liner lock instead of instead of an FRN back lock, but similar size. It's going to be a little cheaper, but the thing that really makes me kind of compare these two is in pocket, they're going to carry very, very similarly. This is going to give you a couple little things. You're going to get bearing pivot, which is quite enjoyable on this. And despite the fact that this is actually a smaller footprint, okay, you end up getting more cutting edge out of the Steel Will here than you do from the Endela. Now, I have one more comparison that I feel like really throws a wrench in the works, and that is this knife right here. So this is the American Lawmen, very similar in size, same sort of mechanism, right? We've got the triad lock, which is a back lock, variation of the back lock that's going to be super, super strong. Similar amount of cutting edge, similar in size, carries about the same. The American Lawman is a little bit heavier, but not much heavier at all. And here's my problem that this creates. This knife is about 15 bucks more, and for that 15 bucks, you get a knife that is better in every conceivable way. Okay, so it's got a stronger lock, it's got better steel, it's got a nicer grind, it's going to be stronger and more robust overall. So if you're at all thinking, if you ever get in a situation where you're doing something a little tougher, then you're going to wish you had the American Lawman. And for $15 more, I think this knife here really creates a situation where it would be hard to justify this purchase. Okay, let's put it that way. In a world where the American Lawman exists, I can't just think of any good reason to buy an Endela. Now, if you just don't like cold steel, maybe you don't like the triad lock, and I know some people don't. If you don't like the overall look and shape of this knife, or for some reason, I find this quite good in terms of its ergonomics, but maybe you don't like the ergonomics on the American Lawman, and for you, the Endela makes a lot more sense. Hey, I totally get that. And it's not that this is a bad knife. So let me give you my final conclusion now, having worked through those comparisons. This is a nice knife, right? I've carried it, I've used it. It absolutely does its job as a folding pocket knife. It's great. All right. It doesn't to me stand out, right? This is not like killing any particular feature where I just go, oh, because of XYZ, this is just the most amazing knife ever. And nothing stands out that way. However, it is an update, a new version of a deservedly classic knife. The Endura is a great knife. The Delica, again, is a great knife. And this is a good knife as well. All right, it fits right in with them. And if you love the Endura but want something a little smaller but don't want to go all the way down to a Delica, it's perfect for that. All right. For me, all of those knives are beaten by a cold steel. Okay, so this knife, I would take an American Lawman any day of the week over this. All right, the Endura, I would take a cold steel broken skull, again, any day of the week over an Endura. A Delica is just too small for me anyway, so it's not really on my radar screen. But even then, a cold steel working man or something like that, there's a whole series of those smaller knives that are kind of similar in design from cold steel. And so that's where I find a problem with many, many back. And by the way, this is not just Spyderco. Almost any backlock, I'm going to be inclined to move toward the cold steel version, or whatever cold steel is similar in size and function. I'm going to lean toward that because the lock is stronger. The steel tends to be better. Anyway, bit of a strange conclusion there. I hope I didn't put anybody off too much, but if I did, I mean, that's okay too. That's part of the whole discussion that we're in here. So yeah, it's a good knife. It works for sure. It's a very capable cutting tool, and I have no problems with this knife whatsoever. For most people, I wouldn't recommend going out to buy it, but if you're a Spyderco fan, if you're an Endura and Delica fan, and you want to have the whole series, there are lots of good reasons to buy this. If you just want a lightweight, useful cutting tool, and you don't want to spend that 15 bucks, hey, this is fantastic. Good knife by Spyderco. It's been a good design for many, many years, and this has not done anything significantly different. So there you go. If you want to pick one of these up, go to White Mountain Knives and use my discount code SHARPSTUFF. You can save yourself 10%. Thanks a lot to Justin for doing that, and thanks to all of you for using that code as well as my other links. That does help out the channel a whole lot. Don't forget again to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.